Welcome to the Champions of Active Women podcast. In this podcast, we will interview individuals who have been successful within athletics and beyond. We hope that these interviews will encourage and inspire girls and women to be active for a lifetime, to reach their goals, and to break new barriers in sport and life. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative and the Sports Medicine Research Institute at the University of Kentucky. The mission of the Active Women's Health Initiative is to optimize health and promote physical activity and wellness for girls and women across the lifespan. We hope you enjoy our conversations and join us in understanding women's health today to ensure women's health tomorrow. Leah Edmond is a Lexington native and recent graduate of the University of Kentucky with a degree in elementary education. While at the University of Kentucky from 2016 through 2020, she was a student athlete playing outside hitter on the volleyball team. During her senior year, Leah earned many honors, including AVCA First Team All-American, AVCA Region Player of the Year, SEC Player of the Year, and First Team All-SEC. She finished her career as the all-time kills leader for the University of Kentucky, breaking a record that stood for 24 years. Off the court, Leah focused on giving back to children in the Lexington community by volunteering at local elementary schools, backpack programs, and summer camps that teach children healthy behaviors. Leah is currently teaching 5th grade at Dixie Elementary School in Lexington. So thank you so much for joining me via Zoom today.
Thanks for having me.
So Leah, you graduated just earlier this year from the University of Kentucky as a decorated student athlete for your accomplishments on the volleyball team. And I'd love to hear the story about how you got your start in volleyball.
So I started playing I was 8 years old. So funny story, I was a gymnast before I played volleyball.
Oh.
I'd been doing that for about 6.5 years before I moved to volleyball. And so basically I kind of hit like my growth spurt around then. I was already kind of larger than everyone else, but that's when I really started like shooting up. And my parents were like, okay, like you're hitting your feet on the bars, like you're never making it across the floor without falling off of it. Like we got to find something else for you to do. So I tried a lot of sports. I tried swimming, golf, basically everything, trying to find something that I liked. And at the time we were living in Arizona because that's where my dad was coaching. And the volleyball coach there was like, hey, have her come to camp, like have her try it. If she likes it, she likes it. If she doesn't, she doesn't. So I went to camp and I was like, oh, I kind of like this. And so that's kind of like where I started. At that point, like they I didn't know anything about like club volleyball and all the stuff they have now for my age group. So it was kind of just like, I played YMCA and I just went to camps every summer. I spent my whole July just doing volleyball camps. And that's kind of how I got to it. I was just really raw, just kind of jumped up and hit the ball. Really didn't know what I was doing, but yeah, that's kind of how I started. I did volleyball and track and field up till high school.
Okay. And what was it about volleyball that just spoke to you? What did you like about it?
I tend to be an aggressive person on and off the court. That's just kind of like my personality. I grew up around guys my entire life and college age men all my life. So all I saw was football. And so that's what I was used to. And so that kind of transpired into my everyday life. And so it allowed me to be aggressive and powerful without having to touch someone. Basketball, I didn't like being pushed because if you push me, I was going to push you back. And that just wasn't my thing. And so it allowed me to be as powerful, as strong as I wanted to without interfering with other people. And I just liked the skill and the thought process that went through volleyball because it's a lot more complicated than you think. And it's a lot more methodical than people see on the court. And so just as a young girl watching older college women do it, I just found it amazing. And I was like, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah, what a fascinating story about, kind of what you knew about yourself and how it fit with one sport versus another. You mentioned your dad being a coach, and was your family, tell me about your family influence and your choices for playing sport.
So my dad played football in college, played in the NFL a little bit, and then he moved on to coaching football in college. And so that literally from the day I was born was very much a part of our lives. And so he had the opportunity while we lived in Arizona to train many different athletes that I was surrounded by, NFL players, NBA players, Olympians, all types of people. And so being around those people and seeing all the things they accomplished just kind of I wanted to be just like them. And so that influence of sports was constantly in my life. And it was something that was always a part of me. Like there was never a time that I wasn't doing something. I was always playing some type of sport. I was always doing something active. I wasn't just allowed to sit around all day. I was always moving. We were always outside. And I think that was like a big part of my childhood was sports, and I was constantly around it. So I kind of had like no choice to do it, but I loved it also because I got to see so many different levels and the opportunities that it could bring people.
Were there female athletes? Sounds like there were lots of male athletes around that your dad was training that you saw as role models. Were there female athletes that stick out in your mind as role models?
Yes. We had a couple in Arizona. Ugh, their names are just not coming to my head right now, but high jumpers. She was in the Olympics. She high jumped in the Olympics. One of like our closest family friends, she's like a sister to me. My dad trained her in sprinting. And so I was around, and of course, all my babysitters were women's basketball players at Arizona. And so I was constantly around them, and my mom worked in athletics too. So I saw them constantly. They were at our house constantly, and they're around our church as well. So there were athletes all over the place and constantly around us. So I definitely have a lot of positive influence, especially in basketball and track and volleyball.
So you had no chance but to be immersed in that culture, right? It would have been odd if you didn't.
I don't know what would have happened if I just said I didn't want to play sports. I think my dad would have had a heart attack.
So now take me through to your college years. You played at UK. Tell me about selecting UK as your choice for where you wanted to play volleyball and your experience here.
So I moved to Kentucky my freshman year of high school. We had Coach Stoops had just gotten hired here, and he was a family friend. We've been with the Stoops at every university they've possibly been at. And so we moved here when they got here. And so funny story, my dad went and talked to Craig Skinner, the head coach, and was like, hey, I have a daughter who plays volleyball, trying to find what school we should send her to in Lexington, like coaching wise, where can she be successful? And so of course he told my dad, like Dunbar is really good, and that's where I ended up going. And of course, Craig didn't think anything of it. He was like, oh, a volleyball player in Lexington, like there's plenty of those. Craig's wife, Megan, was the one who told Craig, like, hey, like, just go send someone out to see her. Like that won't hurt or anything. So going into my sophomore year, one of the assistant coaches, Durs, came and watched me play. And I think at that moment they were like, okay, she's kind of good. Like she's not like just a volleyball player. Cause
there's lots of different levels.
Yeah. My daughter does this and this, and like, you don't know if they're like actually good at it or if it's like for fun. Right. And so after that, they started pursuing me. And I visited them February of my sophomore year, and they offered on my first visit. Being in athletics, my dad was like, hey, like give other schools chances. I loved Kentucky from the first moment I stepped into that office. I was like, oh, I love it here. And I just really connected with the coaches, but my dad was like, give everybody else a chance.
Fair shot.
Yeah, like give everybody a fair shot. Make sure you have something to compare it to. That was his big thing, is you have nothing to compare it to. With my first visit. And so I did that. I went on like one other visit. It was an awful visit, and I hated everything about it. And I was like, I'm not going on another visit. So like, it was kind of not mean, but like places wanted me to come visit. Like there were places that were telling me like, as soon as you step foot on campus, we're going to offer you. But I had that fear of my awful visit of like someone telling me that they wanted me, but like, I knew I was like a backup to someone else. And that was like the feeling that kind of drove the rest of my recruiting. It was like, I didn't want to be a backup. If you want me, you want me. And I only wanted schools that wanted me. And Kentucky was the school that constantly told me like, hey, we see this for you. We see that you are dynamic and you can play multiple positions. And that really spoke to me. So then they offered me in February. I committed in August. And I committed, funny story, 2 days after the current setter, Madison Lilly, came to Lexington and surprised them and committed. And that was I was planning on doing that. I was about to come to practice that weekend and just surprise them. And so then I was like, she ruined my thunder. So I can't tell them that I was coming. And then they, of course, kind of had a feeling what I was going to do. And so then I committed.
Yeah.
And then I came here, and it ended up being the best decision I made. I mean, I had like last moment, like days before I committed to Kentucky, I had schools that were like my dream schools, things that places I thought I wanted to go were like, hey, like come up there. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, do I choose going up there and like risk that, or did I just choose Kentucky? And I ended up choosing Kentucky, and
Never look back.
I loved every single second of it. And it's been a part of my life ever since I moved here. And I think that's what made graduating so hard, because it wasn't like I came from another state, I came from another city. Like I lived in Lexington. So I watched them play the 3 years before I got there. And then I was there for 4 years. So it felt like I was there forever. And so finally leaving was just kind of like, I'm leaving all I've known since I've moved here. And it's still extremely hard. I cried watching the first game because I was just like, this is rough being on this side of it. And I didn't realize how hard it was going to be, especially with everything going on.
Yeah, you graduated at a crazy time. I mean, you didn't even have an in-person graduation ceremony because you just graduated this spring in the midst of the pandemic, and I'm sure that makes it even harder for you to take that next step.
Yeah, for sure.
So do you
I
have,
didn't,
go ahead.
oh, I just said I didn't get the closure that I thought I needed from it, because it was kind of like, oh, you graduated, but there's nothing to celebrate graduating. There was no ending.
Yeah. So you probably have lots of memories, but do you have a favorite moment or a time that sticks out in your mind?
I think my sophomore year at Kentucky, for anyone who's on that team, that year was just incredible. And we just broke so many records, and we just had so many memorable games that, like, I think that season will be forever ingrained in my mind. That's the jersey I chose to have hung up in my house was from that year. Because it just had so many memories. That was the first time we had won an SEC championship since the 1980s, which was a really big deal. We were ranked top 3 in the nation, and just some of the things that happened that year, like it changed the path of Kentucky volleyball, because we were always so close. It was always so close to a championship. My freshman year, we were 2 sets away from winning an SEC championship, and we weren't able to get that. And we were so close to hosting, and so close to this, and so close to that. And so that year was finally the year that all of us were like, no, we're tired of being so close, and we took it and we ran with it. And that season was just in the history books, and I don't think I'll ever forget that year, because without that year, we definitely wouldn't have had the past 2 years that we had, and the expectations and how close we are to reaching those goals that all of us wanted for Kentucky volleyball are now so much in reach, especially with the team that they have this year, which is incredible itself. So it's just really cool knowing that that year really just pushed the program to where everyone wants it to be.
Yeah, I think it's a really amazing experience to be part of building a program, right? And that's what you were part of, and it sounds like even more than I realized, because you were watching them before you became a member of the team, and now you're still. I know that you're still recruiting, or not recruiting, but rooting them on as you're watching as an alumna as well. So you mentioned getting so close to some of your goals, and one of those is I read was a Final Four finish for the volleyball team, and so close but not quite there. So can you tell me about what you learned about yourself, or what your team you think you learned as a team by getting so close to a goal, that a really aggressive and big goal that you set but didn't quite get there? What did you learn about yourself through that process?
I think going back to, I'll even take the moment where I realized it was over when we lost to Baylor last year. And that was it. That was the last game I ever played. That was my last chance. I think at first it gave me a whole bunch of sense of regret. That last month, the whole month of December and January, I felt so much regret. I found myself constantly going back to my freshman year, my sophomore year, my junior year, even that year, thinking about what I do wrong in this situation. Why couldn't I have helped in that situation? Where could I have spoken up and maybe changed the game or changed the story? So like, I feel like I went through all the stages of grief during that, because that's really what it was. I was like denial, just straight up sadness, just all of it, and rage. And just, I've realized, and a lot of people around me have to tell me like, but you did accomplish this. They're like, you are so focused on this one goal, but look at all the things that you did while trying to get to that goal. And I think that kind of just made me think about who I am as a person and how I pushed myself, because I wanted that goal so bad that I pushed myself to limits I've never seen myself go to before. And with doing that, that allowed us to win 3 SEC championships. It allowed me to be an All-American and let me be a player of the year, because I was pushing myself constantly towards that goal. And I knew I had to be my best in order to get to that goal. And I think as a team, it kind of just made us sit back and realize that like, we're still so close. It made us think about like, what are we missing? What, like after that sophomore year, when we were literally a set away from getting it, what are we lacking? What are we missing as a program, as a team? What's setting us apart from those people who made it 4 years in a row? Like Stanford, they made it 4 years in a row. All the girls in my class won 3 out of 4 championships. So it's kind of like, what are they doing? What are the Nebraskas doing? What are Stanfords and the Minnesotas and Texases? What are they doing to get to that point so consistently? And I think it just also brought it back to like, what do we need to do as a program? What are we asking each individual girl for? And what are the motivations of us? Because like the coaches can give us so much, but at the end of the day, there's 6 of us out on the court. You can give us every resource you want to, but if we don't capitalize on those resources and do those things, then we're never going to get there. So then it's also self-evaluation of what's your motivation? Why are you out here? Who are you doing this for? And I think with being so close 3 years in a row and getting to those like measures that we want, now it's like nitpicking, because it's such small things that make a difference. Because it could be like someone took a point mentally, they took a point off, and that could have been a reason why. And so understanding that like, hey, we got to be mentally tough for 25 points. It can't just be I take a point off here, because that point could be the difference between us winning a set and losing it.
Yeah, it sounds like really treating it as a learning process. So getting so close it's not a failure, it's not bad. It's just, what can we learn from this experience so we can be better the next time?
For sure.
So during your time at UK, you also earned your degree in elementary education and are now a 5th grade teacher at Dixie Elementary. And so I'm wondering if any of those lessons you learned, either the ones you just talked about or other lessons, are kind of carrying over now as you start your working life as a teacher.
I think first thing would be patience. I think in volleyball, sometimes I wanted things to happen right away. Like, I want to win championships now. I want to do this now. And knowing that it's not something that happens quickly, it happens over time. And that can be the same with kids and learning. Like, some kids, they're going to get it right away and it's going to be easy for them. And others, you have to lead them and guide them every single step of the way. And sometimes you have to change their plan for them. And that's what happens a lot in volleyball. Things change.
Mm-hmm.
Someone can get injured. Somebody can run a play that you're not used to. And so you have to be ready and adaptable and be ready to change. And that's really prevalent with everything going on right now. I definitely, for sure, coming out of college and even at the beginning of last year, did not think I would be teaching this early. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to go and play professionally. And so having to deal with making that transition to something I wasn't ready for, but in the same sense, I think it's a blessing, because I got to experience teaching through COVID in the spring, and then I ended up having to do it for real in the fall. And so I felt a whole lot more prepared than some of the teachers on my team that had never done this before. They didn't do virtual learning, but that's all I learned for the majority of my spring semester. So I had resources and tools and practice already in doing that. And so it made transferring it over to the real life now really simple. But I just find it interesting, especially because all my kids are the kids that I was with in the spring. So they were
crazy.
They were in 4th grade in the spring, and now I have them in 5th grade. Okay. And so it's really funny to be with them through this again, especially because they know me as a volleyball player. not as a teacher. And so just like me, I was having a hard time making the transition from volleyball to just teaching. They're having it very hard with making it from, oh, she's just our student teacher to like, now she's our teacher. So patience has been a really big thing that I've been working with, because I'm like, I want everything to be perfect. I want it to be like this. This is not how I imagined my first year of teaching. And it's kind of had to change. And I had to realize that, like, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. They could tell us we're going back to school tomorrow. Like, I don't know what. Constantly be prepared and be patient with what's going on around me. And volleyball has helped so much with that, because it's such a sporadic sport. Like, you can watch on the other side of the net, you can think you know what happens, and then nothing happens like that. And you have to be able to respond quickly and think of what you're doing next. You don't get time to calculate and see what's going on. You don't get time to wait and see what's the other side going to do. You just have to react. The sport's made full of reactions. And so it's learning how to control what you can control, and then letting things happen around you and then responding to it.
So patience is a lesson that I think we all, something we could all use a little more of, especially in this current pandemic. And so I think that's an awesome lesson that you're learning, but also probably teaching your students as well. Can you talk about why you chose education, and why the focus on children?
So that's quite interesting, because going into college, I did not want to do education. I love children. That's always been a love of mine, but I loved the medical field as well. And so I wanted to be a pediatrician or a labor and delivery doctor, because that's kind of like, that's always been my love, was medical, everything medical. I found it fascinating as a child, just kind of strange. I just found everything fascinating. And so going to college, I was expecting to go pre-med and then go that route. But we had a little mess up with classes and stuff like that, which led me to have to be in college for a lot longer than I wanted to. And I was like, I don't want to do that. My mom's a teacher, and I knew I loved teaching and I loved being around children in that sense. So I was like, you know what? I'll try elementary. We'll see how this works. I'm still around children. I still love children. And so it was like my happy medium, because I knew if I couldn't be a doctor, I wanted to be a teacher. And so that's how I got into that. And I was like, you know what? I am so happy that class didn't work out. I wasn't able to take it, because I ended up finding something that I loved way more, because I definitely have some teammates that are trying to go in the medical field, and to see how stressed out they are. And I'm just kind of like, you know what? This was a sign. This was a way of telling me that this is not my thing. And so then I end up finding teaching, and I end up finding even more of a love for it. And through volleyball is really the reason why. Being from Lexington, I found myself in a position of being watched a whole lot more by the youth and the kids in Lexington, since I can relate to them because I'm from here. And so seeing the influence I had on children just from volleyball made me really think of the influence that I could have on them in the classroom, and how I wanted to be a positive influence. And then something that came up for me was like thinking about all the times I've moved. I lived in 5 different states throughout like my childhood. And so I thought about all the teachers I had, all the times that like I was the only person in my class that looked like me, and how impactful it would have been if I had a teacher that looked like me. I didn't have anyone that looked like me till I got to Kentucky. Was the first time that I wasn't the only little African-American girl in the classroom. That was the first time that I was more than, like, at one point I was the only one in the entire school. So when I came here and I realized that type of diversity and how much of an impact that made on me, and it was already kind of too late. I was like, can you imagine what little Leah would have been like if she would have had an influence like that in her classroom all the time, or being able to look at my teacher and be like, she understands how I feel. I had a teacher that didn't. I had a teacher that used that as an excuse of her being white and me being Black as a reason why she couldn't teach me. And so that has always resonated with me, because I just never understood as a child, like, what's the issue with me? Like, why is how I look such an issue to how I perform in the classroom? And so thinking of it now with my kids, because I have a very, very diverse classroom, and thinking about how much of a difference it makes for them to see someone who looks like them. And that kind of even drove me more to open up, because I'm like, all kids, no matter what they look like, need to be introduced to some type of diversity. And if they get that not till they get college, then we're doing them a disservice.
Yeah, what a powerful opportunity to role model so many things. I mean, I think we underestimate the power of, seeing people who look like you, whatever that means, right? Seeing people who look like you in positions where you can learn from them. I think you're right. It's a really powerful thing for young kids, and it's awesome that you get to play that role that you didn't have when you were in elementary school. So what are some of the things, and specifically thinking about the young girls in your classroom, what are some of the things you hope that they learn from you when they're looking up to you?
That they can do whatever they dream. And that I found it so interesting that a lot of my kids, like when they first met me, had no clue that I played volleyball. Like they had no clue. They just thought I was like a normal teacher. They had no clue. And so when most of them found out, they were just like, you can play volleyball and teach? I mean, and at that point, I wasn't playing volleyball and teaching because I had graduated, but it's just the thought that like, oh, I can do this and that too. Like, I don't have to just choose one or the other, which I feel like is a lot of what we get, is that sometimes you can only choose this. You can only be this, but you can't do that. And realizing that, no, you can do this and that, and you can go and pursue this. And you don't have to make a choice right away of what you want to do. Like you can go and figure it out. And so I think for a lot of the girls in my class, realizing that they have the potential to do things that they didn't think they were able to do before is what I hope they're seeing from me. And that like, you can go play a sport and do this, or you can go pursue this and still have a love for this. Because even me at my age, I'm finding out other things that I love and want to pursue as well. And that's okay. I don't have to have it figured out. And a lot of them are, God bless them, are just so anxiety ridden and just want everything to be perfect at such a young age. And I'm like, hey, y'all, I'm only about 10 years older than you and I don't have it figured out. So
Yeah.
it's okay. And it's okay like that. They see me make mistakes all the time. Sometimes I forget a lesson. Sometimes I just don't get my words together. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to be perfect. And even your teacher makes mistakes, because at the end of the day, we're all the same. We're all still humans. Even though I'm your teacher now, we all go out and live in the same world. And so I hope that for them seeing me and all the opportunities and the stuff that I've got to show them through volleyball, that they realize that they can do just as much or even more than I have when they get to my age as well.
So thinking about your transition out of volleyball and into teaching and kind of real life in quotations there, how are you staying active now that you're not on the court and not in that structured environment?
It was really hard, to say the least.
Yeah.
Like even like in January, like realizing that like, oh, I don't have to wake up early to work out and I don't have a 3-hour practice after class. Like I'm in control of how fit I'm staying now, because
Hmm.
it's different in college. They're like, well, they're requiring you to stay fit, but at the same time, you have an urge to want to stay in your best shape so you get to play. And
Right.
so now I'm just kind of like, I'm in between I'm teaching now, but like after COVID's done, do I want to go play volleyball again? So like I've been trying to stay in as close to volleyball shape as I can. I've come a new passion is cycling. So
Okay.
I go to like cycle bar 6 days a week. So I go
Yeah.
Monday through Saturday, and Sunday's my off day. And so that has become my like new thing. Like I'm there every single day. I find it invigorating and empowering because it's like your choice.
Mhm.
So like you have an instructor, they're telling you everything that you can do. They're giving you suggestions of how fast to go or how hard the gear is or how tough you're pushing yourself. And the grand scheme of things, every individual person in there chooses what they want to do. So I can choose to go above her recommendations. I can choose to go slower. I can choose to go faster. And I like that feeling of being able to choose how much I push myself. And me knowing, like, I know now, I'm like, I can push myself way harder than that. I've walked out of classes and been like, that was too easy and I could have done better than that. And
That's
so
the
it tells
competitive
me,
athlete in you, right?
yeah,
You can't get rid of that piece.
they show that scoreboard and I just look up there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could have done so much better than that. Like, what is wrong with me? And so it's just learning how to push myself without the outside influence. There's no coaches telling me like, hey, like let's go. I know you can do better than this. It's more like, Leah, like you can do better than this. So you have to push yourself now. There's no outside. So it's definitely been difficult, especially with COVID and not being able to play volleyball. Like I haven't touched a volleyball in months. So that's been really hard, especially with me trying to stay in shape just in case I do get the opportunity to play again. So it's been difficult, but also with my father, who's a strength and conditioning coach, he would not let me sit around all this time and not do anything. So it's definitely been interesting trying to find alternate ways to stay in shape.
So, and that's a challenge we all face. We know we all weren't competitive, high level competitive athletes, but I think, it's humbling and helpful to hear somebody who was at like the peak of their game not too long ago, and still that it's a challenge to find things you enjoy and to stick with it, but a good message. So I end every interview by asking the guests to share what advice you would give to girls and women about playing sports and being active.
Ooh. I would definitely say, don't be afraid to do things for yourself. Don't be afraid to do things for you and knowing your limits. I think throughout my college career, I found myself wanting to fit other people's criteria of like, what's a volleyball player supposed to look like? What's an outside hitter specifically in my position supposed to look like? How strong am I supposed to be? How muscular am I supposed to look? And I got so caught up in that and being afraid to be like, oh, I have muscles. Oh, I'm toned. Oh, I'm kind of big. I'm not a small person. I'm 6'2". Like I'm a giant person. So being okay with myself and my body and doing things for myself and not trying to hold that criteria. I found myself a lot happier once I realized that like, okay, I might be heavier than a lot of other people, but at this weight, I am my strongest. I was my fittest. I played my best, and that's okay. And that was something that I struggled with because I thought I had to be this weight and I could only have this amount of body fat. And if I didn't have that, then I wasn't in peak condition. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't the ideal volleyball player. And once I realized that like, hey, if I'm 15 pounds heavier, but I'm the strongest and I'm playing my best, then that's okay. And if you being that light is what makes you play your best and feel your best, and that's okay. And I think once I got away from those outside criterias and trying to fit into a little mold, I became a lot healthier and a lot happier. Like this, it was just like being okay with who you are and being okay with what you want to accomplish when you're working out and when you're trying to be healthy. Even in nutrition, I found myself being like, oh, I can't eat a cookie today. Like I'm trying to do this. But then once I let go of that, I found myself being happier. Like, hey, I want to eat a cookie today. I worked my butt off in practice. I've been working all day. That's a treat for me. I don't see food now as negative. I was like, I'm punishing myself. I'm eating my best way and I'm exercising in a way that allows me to eat in this way and still be happy. So definitely being okay with who you are and not allowing the outside people and the outside requirements to get in the way of what you feel is best for you.
Yeah, kind of you do you, right? And
Yeah.
being comfortable with that. Did you experience any of those same feelings? You talked about being aggressive, kind of an aggressive person is how you described yourself. Did you have any of those same challenges in kind of getting used to just knowing that you're that way and having people be okay with that?
Oh yeah. That definitely there's a persona of me and my race and my culture of if I'm aggressive, it's I'm angry. It's not that I'm passionate. It's like I'm angry, I'm mad, I'm rude. And so being so afraid of being categorized as like the angry Black woman, I like kind of like held that away. And like my dad was like, why? Like he would see me play and compete and he'd be like, why are you holding back? Like, that's not who you are. You're an aggressive person. You're very boisterous on the court. I'm a big celebrator. I'm the sliding on your knees, jumping up and down every time we score a point type of person. And I felt myself hiding that aggression and hiding the mean game faces and not taking anything from everyone, because I was afraid of how I was perceived. And once I realized that, like, I play my best when I'm being like that, I am my best when I'm being like that. And instead of hiding myself, I need to be who I truly am on the court. And if people can't handle that. Well, I don't know what to do for you, but that's when I was playing my best. And that's when I felt my happiest on the court. But yeah, I definitely struggled with how I was being perceived, because some people can say I have a more male approach to sports. Like if you see a football player and how they play and how aggressive they are, that's kind of how I am, because that's all I've ever known. And so it kind of definitely, as a women's sport, and especially a sport that like people don't see as aggressive at the moment, it was kind of very strange to see someone like me on the court who doesn't smile and has like a mean face on all the time.
Yeah. But that was you. And I'm so glad to hear that you had supportive people in your life, like your dad, who encouraged you to be who you are. And I think those messages that you're giving back to our audience today, and probably to lots of little girls everywhere, it's really powerful. And I love to hear that you are kind of sharing that message now. Is there anything else you'd like to share today with our audience?
I guess I'll talk about my injury, because I feel like at that point that also kind of messed with my mental. So I wasn't like injured to the point where I couldn't play, but I had a nagging injury through the last about 2.5 years of me playing at Kentucky. A knee injury, like just my knee wasn't strong. I was struggling to do things without being in pain, like to the point where like I couldn't sit down and with my knee bent without being in pain. And so I think that also took a toll on me, because once I lost my strength in my knee and I felt fragile, everything else around me crumbled. I wasn't as confident in myself because I let my injury dictate the rest of my life, and not even on volleyball court, off the court as well. I lost confidence in myself because I was like, now no one has faith in me because I'm injured, or I'm not doing what I'm supposed to because I'm injured. And I changed my mentality going to my senior year as if like I'm going to make it as strong as possible so I can be as strong as possible. And I think sometimes, not even in injury, we let outside forces, our mental, get in the way of what we truly can be. And so once I stopped handicapping myself because I had an injury, I found myself being stronger and being more confident. I feel like my injury, I use it as an excuse as to like, oh, this is why I'm not doing this correctly, or this is why I'm struggling with this, instead of taking ownership and being like, no, I can control all of this if I get stronger. I can control it all if I'm being my true self. And I think sometimes in life, not just with an injury, with situations and things happening on with us, we find a way to get out of pushing ourselves to be our best. And I think that's what I kind of learned, is like, I can't use this as a reason to not be my best anymore, because then I'm letting myself down. I'm letting so many others around me down.
It's a really great example of a lesson that transfers well from sports into the rest of life. And I think, we always say that you can learn so much about yourself in sport. And I think that's a great example of one thing you learned in sport that will carry with you probably for the rest of your life.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much for your time today and for being a role model for lots of young people here in Lexington and beyond. And I thank you so much for today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Champions of Active Women podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative and was produced by the Faculty Media Depot at the University of Kentucky. If you enjoyed this episode, you can listen and subscribe to all of our episodes wherever you find your podcasts. For up-to-date information about the Active Women's Health Initiative, you can find us on social media at UKAWHI. Thank you for supporting us as we work to promote health and physical activity among girls and women across the lifespan.